Hello, this is Dr. Kalam here, and I'm going to be giving this brief mini lecture about human resources management and try to explain what human resource management is and how it relates to the management process in general in an organization. And this is one of three mini lectures for week one of your HRM course. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the management process. And this is something you may have heard about before. So it's a common these are common terms that we use in management nomenclature for many years. So the first one is planning, and when we talk about planning, planning involves establishing goals and standards, developing rules and procedures, and developing plans and forecasts. Organizing simply involves giving each subordinate a specific task in our overall plan, and reviewing, revising, reorganizing, or establishing new departments or new lines of authority, and establishing channels of authority and communication so that things are seamless across your organization. Coordinating the activities or work of subordinates is another crucial aspect of organizing, the task of organizing. All right, so staffing is, in the domain of human resources, obviously, but it involves determining what type of people should be hired. I mean, it's important to note that human resources, and I say that in general, but the people in human resources specifically work with line managers, hiring managers, and others in different departments to understand who needs to be hired. From that point, HR managers might develop new job specifications, new job that fit into job descriptions. They'll find hiring ranges for salaries. They'll go out and do some recruiting and so forth for prospective employees, and then they'll go into the selection process. Setting performance standards is part of the staffing process as well as understanding compensation practices that are appropriate in a region, in an organization, and within a budget, obviously. And since we're talking about staffing, we must also understand about evaluating performance of employees, looking at whether or not they are meeting their specific goals that line up with goals of the department, that line up then with goals of the organization. So, and then working with managers to counsel employees, to train employees and develop them so that we can have a seamless process that leads to performance throughout the organization. And then leading. This is where managers HR managers get with others to make sure that a job gets done in the right way and maintaining morale for those employees, and then providing incentives that get employees motivated towards a particular goal. And then finally controlling, which involves setting standards, such as in a sales organization, maybe sales quotas. In manufacturing, high tech, maybe quality standards, or in hospitals or in healthcare, or production levels in manufacturing, and then checking to see how actual performance compares with some standards that were preset, intentional standards, and then taking corrective action when things deviate from those standards. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in your readings. You'll learn about that. So when we ask ourselves the question again, what is human resource management? What is human resource management? We need to understand that it involves things that all managers must know, and HR is responsible because that's their, I guess that's with their wheelhouse, for training and developing managers and employees about equal opportunity and affirmative action in some organizations, learning about and disseminating information and developing policies for employee health and safety, and creating a safe work environment, handling grievances and looking at corrective action processes and the steps involved in getting employees back on track when they deviate. And then in some organizations, looking at labor practices or labor relations. And in some large organizations, government organizations or healthcare organizations that have unionized labor, or organized labor, it's important to build a relationship and understand how labor contracts, for example, work. So we'll talk about that, and it's important to understand that. So finally, in this brief lecture, we'll also understand why HR management is important to all managers. And I say that because every manager in every organization needs to understand how to interact with HR and what their role in managing people becomes, and how that can make or break an organization, for example. So we need to be aware of some of the following things that are important. So we need to make sure that managers avoid making personnel mistakes. Managers don't want to make a mistake such as having employees not doing their best. We want to make sure that we hire the right people, so we need to do due diligence in our hiring process, and HR works in one end of the process, but believe me, managers also play a huge role in the interview process and the final selection. It's not an HR role. The selection is a manager's role in a department where they're hiring an employee. So we don't want high turnover. High turnover is an expensive proposition for any organization. So we want to make sure that we hire the right people, we get them on board, we get them working the right way, and we maintain or sustain those employees throughout their work lives in our organizations. We want to avoid discrimination at all costs. Being cited for unsafe practices, for example, gives the organization a bad reputation. And we want to make sure employees are trained and staffed, or staff are trained in appropriate performance expectations. They understand how their department needs to be effective, and they're part of that effectiveness of the department. We need to understand also how department managers can improve profits and performance for their particular organization. So HR works with others in their organization to help get those results through people. And some of you may spend some time as an HR manager. About a third of the large U.S. businesses surveyed recently have appointed non-HR managers to the top human resource positions for good reason, because they understand the entire organization. And as I mentioned previously, HR is an integral role in any organization and gets involved in all aspects of performance, employee training and development, and setting expectations for employees. And so, and then finally, we'll talk a little bit about line managers and the delegation of authority. And authority is an important concept in HR management. It is the right to make a decision. And like any other decision, when you make a decision that affects the work of others, and there's a delegation or authority to give orders, managers have to be able to distinguish between where their authority starts and ends, and how to appropriately delegate or manage their given authority. So in Learning Outcome 1 in Module 1 for Week 1, these are the things that we'll learn. So stay tuned. This is the end of this brief lecture. We'll have another lecture in a few minutes about the importance of civil rights and the Civil Rights Act and basic equal employment opportunity in your organization. So thank you, and stay tuned.